Hello and welcome to Christina's Cleaning and Homemaking. If you're new here, and welcome back if you've been here before. If you haven't yet, if you could please click the subscribe button down below, I'd really appreciate that. And if you could click the thumbs up for a like on this video, that would be helpful as well. And as always, if you can share this video, that helps spread the word about my channel and these videos and tells people more about the books and book reviews that I'm doing. So that's also always appreciated. Today's review is going to be on a book that I came across actually from Facebook. I ended up friending this person on Facebook and I was really impressed with the book. It is called Catholic Voting and Mortal Sin, How Your Vote Can Endanger Your Salvation, and it's by John Gerard Lewis. And if you stay tuned, I also have a contest going about this book, and I'll share more about that later because I want to get into the book review first. So, I picked up this book because even though I generally am educated on this topic overall, and I know how I'm going to vote, I really want to learn the background as far as Catholic teaching goes, because you can know the rule, but it's an entirely different thing knowing the reason behind the rule and knowing the history to it, and the history, in fact, of why elections tend to go the way they do in our country. He covers all that and then some in this book. So, of the things that I took from the book that I want to bring to you guys is basically the whole Catholic mindset with voting started with Kennedy. Back in the beginning, voting for the Democratic Party came a lot from the immigrants that would come over to the country. They would be helped by the Democrats. The Democrats would pay for weddings and funerals and things that the immigrants were just too poor to take care of, and they built allegiance with those immigrants because of that. And that wasn't necessarily a bad thing because the party at that time was very different than how that party is now. And over time, it changed. And then when Kennedy was up for election, now this is the really bad part, and I knew about this before I read it in the book, but reading the book, it laid out the scene much more to give a better understanding. When it came down to him being questioned about being Catholic and being president, because pretty much it was a Protestant nation scared to have a Catholic president, and he even went to speak in front of a bunch of Protestants saying that he would not let his faith affect his politics. And that was such a bad thing because we're called as Catholics to live out our faith in everything, especially in politics. You don't leave Jesus outside when you go into the polling booth and cast your vote. He should be right there with you, looking over your shoulder, and he should be the reason why you are casting the vote that you are. But he denied his faith in that. And it was also right around the time, maybe shortly thereafter, that Vatican II happened. And so there was this just rift, a wave just rolling across and forming that affected Catholics by and large because, here he is, this Catholic who's running for president, and he gave a tremendous amount of scandal with that. And it's funny, there's a quote in the book from Archbishop, I call him Chaput, but I've heard his name pronounced other ways too, so forgive me if I've mispronounced that. But basically saying that Kennedy, while being known as Catholic, he wasn't a good Catholic for many other reasons. And so Catholics, following Kennedy's example, started not really voting along Catholic teaching. It got to the point where you really couldn't distinguish a Catholic from their secular neighbor at the polls. And that's just a shame because there's a lot of Catholics out there and we could have a tremendous effect, and we have had a tremendous effect in the polls. And so between voting for a Democrat sort of being a family tradition type of thing, and then what Kennedy said and Vatican II happening, because after Vatican II, all the statistics show Catholics didn't go to Mass as much, they didn't receive the sacraments as much, they stopped taking marriages seriously. There was just this sort of bad ripple effect. It's like a loosening of the regulations in the faith. Not that it was actually loosened, but people just stopped bothering to care in a way. And so people weren't living their faith privately or publicly anymore, especially at the polls. And then abortion became legal. And that was just devastating. In fact, abortion is the primary issue of, it was originally the 5 non-negotiables in Catholic teaching. And then I think in 2015, the book said that they added a 6th one, but they are, first and foremost, abortion, same-sex marriage, embryonic stem cell research, human cloning, euthanasia, and then they've added now religious freedom, which that kind of can be twisted a little bit, that last one. But the primary issue hasn't always been abortion. I mean, there's even quotes from St. John Paul II about that being the primary issue. And the Democrats sort of grabbed onto abortion and ran with it. In fact, it's now in their platform. So they've gone from the whole, well, safe, legal, and rare to, they like fully embrace abortion. If you go read their platform, you will see abortion is part of their platform. The Republican platform is against abortion. And that's a major dividing factor between Democrats and Republicans. There are a few Democrats that claim to be pro-life, but in the end, they'll concede with their party and be like, oh, well, we've made progress. We've got it to where, abortion after so many weeks is illegal. And it's like, that's not really anti-abortion. That's okay, mostly, but I'll make concessions. Anytime that you allow abortion, that's a concession, and that's not completely pro-life. And this book also addresses the fact that when it talks about pro-life, it's talking anti-abortion, pro-life. One of the big points that this book made that I really liked is that when people claim, oh, well, what about, other rights of life, like, medical care or job or who's going to take care of the baby, all of that is meaningless if the baby doesn't get to be born. Without birth, nothing else matters. There's no person to take care of. There's no person to care about. The baby has to be born first. And abortion stops that. He also addresses the myth of the separation of church and state, which was in part taken from a private letter from Jefferson to, I can't remember who it was, but he talks about in the book, this private letter that Jefferson wrote that mentioned this concept of separation of church and state. So there was nothing actually established. And the rules making any regulations as far as how religions are addressed by the government was from Senator Johnson. I was watching a documentary last night, and it mentioned that Johnson was the vice president, I believe, to Kennedy. And mind you, this was before I was born, so this is a little bit of history that I have to read up on and know, because I didn't live it, so therefore it's not like just naturally there for me. Johnson was responsible for the Johnson Amendment, naturally, when he was a senator. And that was a really bad thing because it kind of put limitations on practicing your religion, which by all rights should be kind of considered unconstitutional, because this country was founded on the right to life, liberty, and property, the concept of freedom of religion. So life is supposed to be protected, and Johnson blocked a lot of religious things as far as like priests being able to directly speak out and say who to or not to vote for. They can tell you what party you can't vote for, or say these are the things you can't vote for, describe one candidate. But if people are really dense, they're not going to grab he's talking about Biden, I'm not allowed to vote for this person. Or, he's talking about Trump, pro-life, I'm supposed to vote for this person. So the Johnson Amendment kind of put a block on that. But he also discusses how a lot of people misinterpret the Johnson Amendment and it's being misused. I do remember when I was in paralegal studies studying about that, about the separation of church and state, and I actually went into the Constitution and the amendments and all that. And I realized, because I'd written a paper on it too when I was in college, it's not there. The Johnson Amendment is the closest thing to a sort of separation thing, but it doesn't make the distinctions that people claim it does. He also reviews the argument of the personally opposed to like abortion type of thing. Like, I'm personally opposed to it, but politically, I go with what the people want, or politically I support it. You can't be both. You can't say, okay, well, I support this privately, but publicly, I support otherwise. You either support or you don't. He uses a lot of different comparisons that I thought were really stellar about when people will say, oh, well, I'm politically okay with this, but personally, no, it's just a cop-out. Here's a good one for you. It's like saying, I'm personally opposed to racism, but publicly okay with it, since that seems to be one of the big things right now. You can't say, oh, well, personally, I wouldn't, be prejudiced against that person, but hey, politically, go for it. No, it's contradictory. It doesn't even make sense. He also reviews the seamless garment, which that theory it's a heresy given to us by Bernadette. If you know about Bernadette, he was a pedophile. He was a cardinal. From what I understand, he was also a Satanist, and he is the one who gave us communion in the hand. He's the one who pushed it through when there was no communion in the hand in the U.S. originally. And I can link below in the description the blog article that talks about him and that history there. So he's the one who came with this whole seamless garment argument, which, let me tell you, the author of this book completely destroys, and he does a good job at it. He also points out when people talk about, oh, well, voting based on your conscience, well, there's also a responsibility to have a well-formed conscience. If you don't bother to educate and form your conscience, you can't vote based off of it because you're not going off of a well-formed conscience. Your conscience is therefore ignorant. And guess what? The church also says we have a responsibility to educate our conscience. So you can't just say, oh, well, I didn't know, so I'm blameless. No, if you didn't bother to educate your conscience, then there's a definite problem. So you can't just say, oh, well, I voted for, Biden because I hadn't educated my conscience, and so I didn't know that I couldn't do that. There's plenty of information out there right now, including this book, and there was information out for the last several elections too that would let people know. In the book, there's also, I'd say, at least 3 chapters that are pretty much straight quotes from either priests, bishops, cardinals, even popes in there, talking about how you cannot vote for a candidate who supports abortion, that you must go with the most pro-life candidate. By pro-life meaning anti-abortion, because that comes first. There's a difference between rights and values. Abortion is against the right to life. It is a primary in the teachings of the church. If you don't get to be born, the rest of it doesn't matter, like I said before, which was a really good point that this book made. So when people come up and say, oh, well, what about the right to healthcare or housing? It's like, you don't need either if you haven't been born. He also goes over the history of voting, showing that Catholics overwhelmingly voted for Obama, which I guess in a way I was kind of stunned by that because I voted against him. I believe the candidate back then was McCain. I think it was McCain, and there was Sarah Palin. And I voted for him because I sure wasn't voting for Obama, especially with his stance on abortion. But a lot of Catholics apparently did. And that is just disgraceful. Especially with his stance on, he's like all out on abortion. Like, I believe he's even kind of up to like birth. It's just sad. The tide turned with Trump. With the election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, that's when the tide turned. And Catholics came out and they voted the right way. And a lot of people will like to say, oh, well, Trump is completely pro-life, he's only pro-birth. Well, that's the pro-life that really matters here. And people are ignoring that. And what it comes down to is this. We are required by the church to vote for the most anti-abortion, pro-life candidate. So Biden is pro-abortion. As a Catholic, you cannot in good conscience vote for him because there is a candidate, Donald Trump, who is pro-life. And he's actually done a lot of work in the 4 years he's been in for the anti-abortion, pro-life movement. In fact, there's one page in here where he covers like the first 3 things that Donald Trump did in the first few months of his presidency that promoted the pro-life movement and stopped abortion, including moving to defund Planned Parenthood, which was a big deal. There are a few quotes in here that just really caught my attention. Ironically enough, one is from Archbishop Jose H. Gomez from when he was in San Antonio, Texas. The title is, "The Right to Life is in the Declaration of Independence. Abortion is an issue that affects all segments of our society. It represents the primary right guaranteed in our Declaration of Independence, the right to life. Unless we protect this fundamental right of each human person at all stages of life, no other issue or liberty matters. Well said. Here's another ironic one. These that I'm pointing out right now are because there are some quotes in this book from people that you never would have seen coming that don't really have a reputation for being role model cardinals or bishops and being usually pretty liberal, but man, they come down on this topic and they do a good job of it. So this is another quote from Archbishop Wilton D. Gregory. Without the right to be born, other issues don't matter. According to the principles of faithful citizenship, Catholics must support the just care of the poor, the rights of workers, the dignity of people who immigrate to a new nation, the conservation of the environment. We must assess the very complex economic issues, seek to provide affordable health care for people who do not enjoy that security, and foster the more humane treatment of those who are in prison, to list only some of the issues that we now face. However, before and prior to all those vitally important concerns, faithful citizenship places the issue of life itself. All of those other matters are of immense and lasting significance, yet they remain of no consequence for those who are not granted the first right, the right to be born. And another one in here is by Father Stephen F. Tarraco, who's an associate professor of theology at Assumption College. It says, abortion and death penalty are not equivalent issues, because a lot of people will bring it up and say, oh, well, you're against abortion. Are you against the death penalty? They're not even on the same front, really. And it goes, it is not correct to think of abortion and capital punishment as the very same kind of moral issue. On the one hand, direct abortion is an intrinsic evil and cannot be justified for any purpose or in any circumstances. On the other hand, the Church has always taught that it is the right and responsibility of the legitimate temporal authority to defend and preserve the common good, and more specifically, to defend citizens against the aggressor. This defense against the aggressor may resort to the death penalty if no other means of defense is sufficient. The point here is that the death penalty is understood as an act of self-defense on the part of civil society. In more recent times, in his encyclical Evangelium Vitae, Pope John Paul II has taught that the need for such self-defense to resort to the death penalty is rare, if not virtually non-existent. Thus, while the Pope is saying that the burden of proving the need for the death penalty in specific cases should rest on the shoulders of the legitimate temporal authority, it remains true that the legitimate temporal authority alone has the authority to determine if and when a rare case arises that warrants the death penalty. Moreover, if such a rare case does arise and requires resorting to capital punishment, this societal act of self-defense would be a morally good action, even if it does have the unintended and unavoidable effect of the death of the aggressor. Thus, unlike the case of abortion, it would be morally irresponsible to rule out all such rare possibilities a priori, just as it would be morally irresponsible to apply the death penalty indiscriminately. So it makes a good distinction there. Another quote is by Deacon Michael Bickerstaff, Editor-in-Chief, The Integrated Catholic Life. And there's a whole quote here, but I'm going to go down to the bottom of it, where it says, in our opposition to abortion, we are not excused from caring about other moral wrongs. We may not be indifferent to them, but abortion and euthanasia are not two of many moral equivalent attacks on human dignity and life. These two direct attacks are preeminent moral threats against life. They are a greater moral weight. So all these issues aren't weighted the same, which is why abortion is the primary issue. I'm going to read to you real quick the table of contents to give you an idea of what's all in this book. It starts out with a teaching fatally ignored. Does a Catholic voting bloc even exist? The Greatest Seduction, the Kennedy capitulation, the JFK aftermath, suddenly like everyone else, the anti-abortion Democratic Party, the untaught Catholic voter, a fallen away opportunity, America's mythical law, separation of church and state. Yes, I am trying to impose my beliefs on you. For better or worse, the bishops are still in charge. The bishops fiddle while Rome's church burns. I'm personally opposed to abortion and any law against it. Joe and Nancy wrestle with God Almighty. Catholic doctrine according to Alfred. The holy seamless garment. Clerics all dolled up in their seamless garment. The seamless garment torn apart. The seamless garment ripped to shreds. Conscience isn't what you think, or what you think. Bishops warn your vote can be a mortal sin. Step by step, how to vote so you don't go to hell. Not voting can also be a mortal sin. How Trump overcame the Catholic intelligentista and the Catholic ticket, not the one with the Catholic. And that last chapter is actually something we're seeing right now, because Biden likes to go around toting about how he's Catholic, and nothing about him is really Catholic except for his baptism. That's pretty much where it is. He doesn't practice his faith, and he makes choices and votes against his faith. Trump is actually baptized Presbyterian, and he behaves more like a Catholic than Biden does. And his vice president, Pence, is a baptized Catholic who fell away into Protestantism. I believe he's Episcopalian, but I'm not positive. But he still behaves more like a Catholic than Biden does, which is sad. So I pray for Trump's conversion and Pence's reversion. And I do pray for Biden, but he's not going to get my vote. Trump will get my vote. This book backs up everything that I'd already believed, and it expands on it. And that's the beauty of this book, is that if you've got questions, it will answer them. If you're trying to buck Catholic teaching, get this book, because it will challenge you and it will explain to you what the Catholic Church teaches and why you need to vote the way that you do. And I just can't recommend this book enough. I was very excited to get a hold of it, and then it was hard to put it down once I did start reading it. And my husband and I are actually friends on Facebook with the author, and my husband contacted him, and so, like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm having a contest. I have 3 copies, brand new, cover hasn't even been cracked on them, books that the author gave me to give away in a contest. And so I'll have more information in the description, but in the meantime, the details of the contest go like this. So you must be subscribed to the channel to enter the contest. You have to put a comment down below saying what your favorite part of the video, the review was. And for each time you tell someone else about the video and they come watch it and they comment telling me that you sent them, that'll be another entry for you. And so in 2 weeks, I will do the drawing. And like I said, you could have more than one entry by, if you've already liked, which that's included, you have to like the video, you have to be subscribed, comment down below about your favorite part of the video, and then anyone that you refer to the video and they come and they comment telling me that you sent them and they tell me what they liked about the video, then you'll be entered again for that entry, and they will also get an entry, obviously. So I have 3 copies to give away. He was very generous. So there are going to be 3 winners of a copy of this book, and it is most definitely worth the money, and entering is definitely worth it because you're going to get a free copy of the book out of it, which is very cool. But he did a good job writing this book. He writes a lot of law stuff, so he knows the law. He's a very good writer, brings his point across really, really well. And I'll give you a little reading from one of the very first pages that tell you about him. John Gerard Lewis is the founder of VotingCatholic.com, which guides Catholics on how to vote according to the teachings of Catholic bishops. He is the former board chairman of the First Amendment Partnership, a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit and nonpartisan organization dedicated to protecting religious freedom for Americans of all faiths. Mr. Lewis is also president of the Lewis Legal News Incorporated, which owns businesses and legal publications and also processes legal advertisements in several Midwestern states. He has been a regular columnist for SeekingAlpha.com and The Trading Deck at MarketWatch.com, and has appeared as a guest on Fox Business News. Mr. Lewis's professional activities are summarized at JohnGeraldLewis.com. He lives with his wife, Dana, in suburban Kansas City. Like I said, he's really an excellent writer, so the book is a smooth read. You will learn a lot. He makes his arguments well and makes his point well, and he teaches you because he has canon law in here, he has the catechism in here, he has encyclicals in here, quotes from priests and bishops like I read to you. He has quotes in there from Chaput. He has the good Tobin in there, which I believe is Thomas Tobin. The book is packed. It is just, it's loaded with good information and teaching you. And if you really care and you really want to know how you should be voting as a Catholic, you should really read that book. I mean, seriously. Even if you think you already know Catholic teaching and how to vote and who to vote for, this will guide you in future elections even. Because it doesn't just stop at the concept of Trump or Biden. It guides you in how to vote in every election if you're going to be voting as a Catholic. So I highly recommend it. It's an excellent read. It will educate you. It's full of information. And some stuff may just confirm for you what you already knew. Other stuff you may sit back and go, wow, I didn't know that one. So definitely read this book. I encourage you to enter into the contest because that means you have a chance at winning one of 3 copies of a book for free, which is always a good deal. Please click like, subscribe down below, share the video, because not only will that help my channel and show me that you really did appreciate the review, but it will also help you in the contest, if you go and comment down below. And I will be doing another book review soon. I'm in the process of reading that one. It's written by a man, Paul A. Nelson, who has a very similar history to that of my husband's in the church. It's a little bit different, but he wrote a really good apologetics book, and I'll be reviewing that one next. So look forward to that, and thank you for watching my video, and I will see you in my next video.